In this video, we will be discussing some of the best practices that organizations can adopt for socialization. And I'm going to be using a tactics model that was suggested by two scholars named Van Maneman and Schnein. And this is one of the most commonly used approaches to understanding organizational socialization. They proposed that what people learn about their work roles in an organization is often a direct result of how they learn it. And they outlined 6 tactics that can be used to influence newcomers. Now, each of these 6 tactics is along a continuum. So the first tactic is whether socialization is done collectively or individually. That means, how do you do socialization? Whether newcomers are socialized in groups or they are individually socialized, plays a role in how they get influenced. Second is whether the socialization is formal or informal, which is basically, are individuals or newcomers segregated from insiders during socialization, or they are integrated with other employees during socialization. Is your socialization sequential or random? Whether or not newcomers are told explicitly about sequences of planned socialization events, or they are randomly allocated to different socialization events. Now, is it fixed versus variable? Whether or not there is an explicit fixed timetable for completing the various socialization stages that you have decided for your organization. Is it serial or disjunctive? Which means whether or not previous job incumbents are available as role models for newcomers. This might become very important for organizations which are startups. Is the socialization based on investure versus divestiture, which is whether newcomers receive positive social support from insiders or they do not receive positive social support from insiders. Research has confirmed that using some kind of institutionalized tactics, that means some kind of formal tactics, are often associated with lower role ambiguity, lower role conflict, and lower intention to quit. They also help reduce anxiety in newcomers. And they have some negative effects as well. For example, it may lower role innovation. In terms of positive relationships, we find that tactics have been found to have high effect or higher effect on things like job satisfaction and organizational commitment, and also things like task mastery. However, as I mentioned before, they may have negative effects on things like creativity and innovation, especially when it comes to a role. Now, what should we be focusing our socialization practices on? Well, the learning domains can be divided into 5. The first learning domain would be, we need to socialize newcomers on the task that they need to perform, the role they need to perform, and the performance metrics that we want them to fulfill. And where does this come from? This will come from sources, learning sources. And these learning sources will be colleagues, their supervisor or their manager. If they have mentors, mentor. And it will also be through formal socialization. Second, newcomers need to understand or learn about their co-workers, their social group, and this unit group or work group. And this also comes from colleagues, supervisors, mentors, and formal association or formal socialization. Next, they need to learn about the history, goals, values of the organization. Now, this is important so that they know where they are placed within organization. Where are we actually working? that will increase organizational commitment. Now that will actually happen when they learn from colleagues, they learn from the supervisor, they learn from the mentor, and they also learn from organizational literature. Next, they need to learn about the organizational politics. Now, why should they learn about organizational politics? Because in this particular sense, they need to know which networks should I be a part of to acquire certain resources to do my job. And that will often come from colleagues, it will come from supervisors or managers, and it might come from mentors. But it may not come through the other two sources that I have mentioned earlier. And finally, they need to understand or learn about their future prospects. And this will come only through organizational literature and formal socialization. Now, we have spoken about the 5 different learning domains that a newcomer needs to be socialized on and the learning sources that they have. The question is, how do I measure success of these? Well, one, you can measure role performance of newcomers within an organization. You can also look at their extra role behavior or extra role performance, which we also call organizational citizenship behavior. You can look at their social cohesion within their team or within the work group at large. You can look at the internal stability that exists within an organization. And finally, you can also see how individuals represent the organization externally. The different learning domains and the different learning sources that we have mentioned in this video imply that organizations need to use different tactics together or simultaneously. Now, for example, formal socialization and organizational literature would require an individual to be exposed to some kind of formal socialization practices or tactics. On the other hand, how does a co-worker or a social group work or my team work, or what kind of politics exist in this organization, what kind of networks are there and I need to be a part of which network, is often through informal networks or informal socialization tactics. The best practice would be to use a mixture of both formal socialization tactics as well as informal socialization tactics. And as I mentioned earlier, these can be based around the 6 tactic model that was suggested by Van Maneman and Schnein. To quickly summarize this video, I first introduced you to 6 tactics that have been suggested by literature to have successful or have effective socialization. I then told you about the positive and negative effects that socialization might have. And finally, I told you about the learning domains that should be covered in socialization and the different sources where this learning can occur from. And we ended our discussion with the idea that for organizational socialization to occur successfully, you need to use formal as well as informal tactics. And that will really depend on how the organization is, at what stage it is, what is the strategy, and what it wants its human capital to achieve. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.